Welcome to the DFS Express Podcast, your stop for daily fantasy sports talk, including slate breakdowns and industry commentary. Let's go to the host of our show, the Daily Fantasy Sniper.
A different kind of episode today, as we are going to sit down with Mr. Bear of DFS Army, NBA contributor, coach. Mr. Bear, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
My pleasure. I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great. First one of these episodes I've had in a little, actually ever on this podcast. So what we're going to do, guys, if you can't tell from the title, we're going to talk NBA, specifically late season and playoff NBA, and some differences between how you would go about it from the regular season. And this will be good for me, too, because for what I do, I mostly play MMA, soccer, those fringe sports. I play NBA and NHL, but it's like once a week. So this will be informative to me as well. But before we do that, I want to do our quick intros and reads. If you are listening to this podcast on iTunes or anywhere, really, make sure you leave a 5-star review on iTunes. That'll get you in a contest to win a free DFS Army t-shirt. I got Kevin to give one of those away, which is not always the easiest thing to do. So leave a 5-star review on iTunes, be entered into that, and you can win a DFS Army t-shirt. I'll draw that at the end of the month. Make sure you are following Mr. Bear on Twitter. It's at Mr. Bear here. If you're not a DFS Army VIP, make sure you are. Go to dfsarmy.com, and you can get 20% off using the code Bear. What's your code?
My code is Bear.
I should have guessed that. I didn't know if it was Mr. Bear or Bear, but close enough. Use the code Bear for 20% off your membership. You can also follow me on Twitter. I'm at the DF Sniper. And wherever you're watching or listening, please like, comment, subscribe. I think that's enough of the intro. So for those who don't know, Mr. Bear, what's kind of your style of play? Are you mostly a cash game player, a GPT player, hybrid? I know DFS Army is big on the ladder system, as I am. What's your typical style of play as you've gone through the NBA regular season?
Primarily tournaments. Certain parts of certain times of the year, I'll play more cash games, but for the most part, tournaments. I don't necessarily play those 80,000 participant tournaments because I don't like to not be profitable. So I don't play those too much, and if I do, I'm putting 100 to 150 in there. So I like to go for the higher dollar, single entries or, that kind of thing.
Okay, so NBA is transitioning from this, we're going into the playoff race. You got, we had the trade deadline this past. You got guys resting constantly. I don't want to talk about Anthony Davis. Minutes restrictions, more and more injury news, guys sitting for rest, teams that are tanking. Of all that stuff that I just mentioned, in terms of as we get just towards, we're talking late season, regular season NBA, what's the one or two things you would really focus in on the most? Because there's a lot of noise this time of year.
In terms of selection?
In terms of not yet contest selection. When you're looking at a player pool, breaking down games, are you going game by game and weighing different, are you focused on who's going to get minutes? Are you focused on what teams, who has what to play for, the injury reports, or is it really a balance of all this stuff? But if it's all of it, it's a lot for the average Joe to get through. What would kind of be one or two most important things to look at be?
Well, I think so. The first thing you have to look at, particularly at this time of year, which is what we're talking about, is you have to look at teams that are still relevant in the playoff hunt and the positioning within their respective conferences. That's really important because those teams that are doing that are actually going to, play their regular rotations, and they're going to not have random people, random players coming at them. So what happens in the regular season often is you see, you'll have a night where really some random guy that nobody knows who he is all of a sudden starts putting up 40 points. I mean, where did that come from? Well, you don't see that as much at this stage of the season, particularly into the playoffs, but even before the playoffs, you don't see that as much. Rotations get tighter. Coaches are a lot tighter on who they're playing, who they're not playing. At this point of the year, if you're a playoff team, at this point of the year, they tend to really, tighten up their rotations.
So the way I'm reading in between the lines the next step. So maybe is it fair to say that these high dollar players you want to look for on the teams that are in contention, because they might get more minutes as these rotations tighten up. And on the other hand, we're always kind of hurting for value, it seems like, unless we get a weird slate where there's tons of chalk because of injury options. Can we go to some of these tanking teams and find cheap punts? Is that a generally, strong strategy?
I mean, you certainly can. I mean, at this stage, here's the biggest thing that's going to be standing out over the coming 3-ish weeks. NBA has what's called 10-day contracts. And 10-day contracts are basically, certain teams have a minimum obligation of roster spots they have to fill, as well as a maximum. So, and that number changes based on the time of year. So, earlier on in the season, you get 16 roster spots, 15 roster spots, and then 14 roster spots. And then I think it might be the same. I have to double check, but that number then changes for the playoffs as well. And then, certain for playoff teams, you have to sign someone, a player before the deadline, and the deadline was just a few days ago. I think it was Monday or Tuesday of this week. Just to be able to, that player is now playoff eligible. So there's all kinds of rules and stuff that we look into. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
Yeah. Oh, okay, great. And so that's something we certainly want to look at. But these 10-day contracts for these teams that are not in contention, let's just put it that way.
You mean like my Knicks?
Yes, exactly like your Knicks. Exactly like your Knicks.
So, as we get later and later, there's this fine line that I'm finding as slates get more volatile. Do we have an edge, or is there more variance? Because as someone who's trying to be profitable, obviously increasing your edge, especially over the rates we have to deal with, is key. Do we get more edges late season NBA, or is it just more variance and we should kind of tighten up how much we're playing?
I think it's more of an advantage for tournaments for the players that pay more attention, right? It's a lot more difficult for the casuals, but for the folks like me and a lot of the other DFS Army people, it's certainly an advantage to us because as we're doing podcasts daily, as we're doing all that kind of stuff, like we know that we know what's going on. We know that this person. So I talked about the 10-day contracts, right? So the 10-day contracts, what are they don't just sign them just to fill up their roster. They sign them for to see if they can play, because sometimes they might want them next season, right? Sometimes they might want to give them an opportunity to play in their summer league team, or maybe they're looking for a certain position to fill next season. So there's all kinds of other reasons why a guy would play outside of, just filling up a final roster spot.
So with all these cheap guys, and all these guys are going to come in probably near min price, as you're building tournament rosters, are you expanding how much money you're willing to leave on the table?
Well, not really, because for the most part, what I do is I like to keep, at least 4 or 5 of those top contenders who are still jockeying for position. Because, if you think about it, they're like, I'll give you a prime example. Let's just talk about tonight if we can. You've got.
For anybody listening, we're recording this on Friday. So we're recording this Friday. This is probably going to come out over the weekend or possibly Monday. The previous Friday to when you're listening to this is the example we're going to go through.
Yeah. So tonight, Nuggets play the Warriors in prime time, national TV. A lot of people think, Warriors don't care. Well, here's the thing, right? Like that kind of game, if the Nuggets win, they're going to be tied for first place in the Western Conference with the Warriors. If the Warriors win, they are a full game ahead. And so, or it'll be 2 games ahead at that point if they win. They're a full game now. And so, there's a lot to look at there and say, well, neither team's going to lay down. And the Nuggets have lost a few games, and the Warriors have lost a few games. And so, yeah, if I've got other teams that sign, some 10-day guy at minimum price, now, a lot of what you're asking, too, is very, very site-dependent. So, am I playing FanDuel? Am I playing DraftKings? Am I playing Yahoo? Am I playing Fantasy Draft? What am I playing? It makes a big difference because, for example, I'm primarily a FanDuel guy. I certainly have a decent amount of Yahoo as well, which I actually I've really started to enjoy their platform for DFS. But FanDuel is the only platform that has a drop score format. And so I can say, well, you know what? I know these 2 guys are going to at least play, right? And I take all of those guys that are going to be minimum price, that are going to play anywhere, let's say, between 18 to 25 or whatever it is. I look at those guys, and I personally put 2 of those in every lineup. And I have them do a drop score competition, right? Which one of you is going to suck more, basically? Whichever one of you, or sucks less, sorry. Whichever one sucks less.
Until Anthony Davis gets ruled out, at 7:01. But I get your point.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not much you can do about that. But at least not this year.
We'll see where drop score goes. This is actually a good just talking point. I'm gonna have another episode probably next week.
Great.
Where you NBA guys are probably not you and the coaches, just in general. I look in and not just our rooms and not ragging on DFS Army members. That would be stupid because I'm a coach as well. The industry in general, NBA is one of the most tilt-heavy sports. People lose their minds at 7:01. It's crazy.
What's crazy about it too is that even if the player that they have is in the game and they don't put up like their value in the first quarter, my night's over. How is your night over? Like
I once
first
had
quarter of
first
game.
Yeah, I'm as I said, casual NBA player. I know that Lou Williams is he's a bench player, second rotation player. I get it. That's where he's going to get his minutes. He's going to sit the first 8 to 10 minutes of the first quarter.
Yeah.
But I was talking to somebody who he only put up three points in the first quarter. I'm done. Well, dude, he played 2 minutes. He's actually averaging 1.5 points per minute. And I was just, the reason it popped in my head is I feel like this time of year, you mentioned it's better for tournament players. To me, that just all screams volatility, which is good if you can take advantage of it. It needs a casting guy. It actually makes me want to back away just a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you tend to see a lot more sharps this time of year at the top of the standing. So what you're saying is certainly correct.
All right, so now that we've talked a little bit about late season NBA, I would think, my assumption is, and maybe I'm wrong, this is totally going to flip as we talk about playoff NBA DFS, because all the teams, for the most part, are going to be good.
Yep.
Rotations really should shrink up.
Yep.
You're probably going to be hurting for value, again, another assumption I'm making. How do we differ from, where does playoff NBA differentiate from both regular season NBA and the high volatility late season that we just talked about?
I mean, like you said, there's not much in terms of like shock value. So early in the playoffs, you still have massive slates. Like tonight we have 9 games. But once playoffs start, you're not going to have 9 game slates. You'll have 4 or 5 game slates, but particularly early on in the first round where, every team is playing, all 16 teams are playing, but, you're not going to get like 8 games in a night. So it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 5 games at the most. And so now, it's a much more balanced approach than it would be at this time of year, where, as I mentioned, I'll find 2 of those minimum price guys or, under a certain dollar amount, lock them both in and have them compete for top score. You can't really, it's going to be very pointed in the playoffs. And what I mean by that is, so for DraftKings players, you are as balanced as you can get. You can't really do stars and scrubs because there really aren't that many scrubs in the playoffs. And there are scrubs in terms of where they stand on their own team, like a backup guy or a guy that's just there for defense and doesn't really put up points. So in that sense, yeah, you have scrubs, but even those scrubs can still put up 20, 25 fantasy points. And so going with a stars and scrub lineup in the playoffs rarely works in DFS.
That's interesting, but that makes sense to me. But my initial thought was that we see superstars shine in the playoffs. I would think that points per game, fantasy-wise, of Steph Curry and LeBron James, I don't think they're going to make it there.
No, probably not. But no, and I don't mean don't play any stars. I just mean don't play 3, 4, 5 of them and then plug in like value guys. That's what I mean. So you're going to have to take a lot more stands. Like for me, DFS is all about taking stands. That's how you win a DFS. Specific to tournaments, right? When you're right, you're going to win a lot. And you're not going to be right all the time. But when you win and you're a tournament player, those tournament dollars are pretty big. And so, case in point, so I made the FanDuel Live Finals this year. And, I took about, you probably remember, Sniper, I took about 2 weeks to focus on qualifying. And midway through the second week, I did. And what I was doing for those 2 weeks, I was taking stands. I'm like, I want this guy and this guy and this guy. And I'm going to make 10 lineups, 20, whatever it is, lineups. And these 2, 3, 4 guys, depending on the night, depending on the situation, were in every one. Those guys go off, I'm going to win. Those guys don't go off, it's on to tomorrow, right? It's very similar when the playoffs come around to where everyone's going to have to play that way. You have to take a stand. So on a night where Houston, Golden State, Denver, Utah plays, Milwaukee plays, you're going to have Steph, you're going to have Durant, you're going to have Jokic, you're going to have Donovan Mitchell, you're going to have Giannis Antetokounmpo, you're going to have, potentially Andre Drummond and Blake Griffin. You're going to have 5, 6, 7 guys that are well over 10K. You can't play more than 2 of them. The roster won't allow you to. Unless the sites royally screw up on pricing, which they don't tend to do, you're going to have to take a stand and pick 2. Now, when you're playing tournaments, you can pick 2 per lineup and kind of move it around if you want to play multiple lineups, right? That I'm okay with. But outside of that, you're not really going to be able to jam in 3 or 4 of those guys. You got to pick 1 or 2 and then go kind of medium range the rest of the way.
So this is not as specific to late season NBA as the topic of the podcast is, but just in general, say someone when I play tournaments, I'm between a 10 and 20 lineup player. Unless I'm going to go after a mini max for fun, but in this example, let's say 10 to 20 lineups. How many players are you locking anyone in? Are you 70% exposure? What's the size of your core in terms of how many players and how exposed are you to that core?
So if I'm doing 20 lineups, it's a little bit different than if I'm doing 100, 150. When I do 150, I don't have to go over 60%. Because if I'm not going to win a tournament, at least I'd like to salvage some of my, losses. So if I'm about 60% on a guy that puts up an absolute dud, well, I've got 40% without him, so I can at least, have some shots. That's how I play. That's for 150. 20 lineups, though, it's a different combination. 20 lineups, how are they going to lock in a 2 to 3 player core and then fill out the rest around it at 20 lineups? That's how I tend to do it.
Are you, and as we get towards NBA now, this is more of a, no, I guess, you know what, I'm more of a DraftKings player, so I'm pretty unfamiliar with the FanDuel product, although I'm going to be, after some conversations with other guys on staff, I think for baseball, I'm moving to FanDuel this year, but that's for a different podcast and hopefully a different guest. But does FanDuel have the single game showdown type plays for NBA?
Yes, but it's a different format. So
in general, are the playoffs a place to attack those?
So last year's playoffs, we made an absolute killing in the single game on FanDuel. I mean, I had some members who made about $4,000 to $5,000 a week just playing those single game tournaments and 10-person and 20-man turn leagues and all that. Yeah, I mean, we did really, really, really well. Now, if you think NBA in general is volatile, single games are 100-fold, but you're going to have games that are blowouts. It's less frequent in the playoffs, but it happens, particularly 1 versus 8, right? First round of the playoffs. I mean, essentially, whoever, if the Warriors, for example, end up playing the Clippers, for example, you're gonna have some blowouts. If the Milwaukee Bucks end up playing, I don't know, Charlotte or whatever, you're gonna have blowouts. But outside of those blowout games, so for DraftKings, you have one captain, and then the rest of your 4 are utility players. And that captain is 1.5 times the price and 1.5 times the production. For FanDuel, it's a little bit different. For FanDuel, pricing is the same no matter what spot. However, the difference is, with FanDuel, is your MVP, instead of your captain, is 2 times the points. Your second spot is 1.5, and your third spot is 1.2. So essentially what they're doing is they're making you have to get the top 3 scorers in the right order. Because if you don't, the person who does, it's just a massive advantage, right? For example, between 2x and 1.5x, like if you get those 2 wrong, and the other person gets the same 2 players but swaps them, you can't win. Yeah. So that's how it is there. But there's typically, like you mentioned the Stars comment earlier about the playoffs, you kind of know who the stud of every game is, right? And so the only thing that makes it difficult FanDuel-wise is, do I want the stud from this team or that team? Which stud do I want more? And I tend to lean towards the worst team stud, because the worst team's stud depends on their stud more than the other team does. So, Warriors, if it's not Steph Curry, it's Durant, it's Klay Thompson, it's Draymond Green, it's DeMarcus Cousins, it's any one of their starting 5. Even Andre Iguodala can come and have a huge game. The Charlotte Hornets, for example, if they're going to win games, it's because of Kemba Walker. So, Kemba's going to have all the usage, take all the shots, have the ball in his hands 90% of the time, and it's kind of a no-brainer. So that's how I approach playoff games.
Actually, that all makes perfect sense. So, last thing I wanted to talk about in the playoffs, because it's something, actually, your thought on the topic in general, and then how it applies to the playoffs, is pace of play. I've heard people talk about how important pace is, higher pace, faster play equals more possessions for both teams. Are you a believer in pace? And how do you believe that translates to the playoffs? As in, I've heard commonly, if there's 2 big pace disparity teams, you lean towards the home team who's going to, kind of control the pace of the game. I've heard other people say it's just the better team that kind of correlates to the spread. Or do you think pace overall is just overrated because DraftKings and FanDuel kind of factors that into pricing?
Well, I don't think it's overrated. I think it's more of a really loaded question there, because I think so pace is certainly not overrated. Pace is very important for guards, shooting guards, point guards, power forwards. It's very important there. Where pace is, so where I look for the opposite, where I look for slowest pace, is when I'm picking my centers. Because centers tend to be a lot more, and when I mean centers, I mean traditional centers, not like today's, stretch centers. You still have Rudy Gobert, you still have DeMarcus Cousins, and you still have Marc Gasol, and you still have those Clint Capellas, you still have those traditional bigs that are out there. So don't let anyone tell you that they don't exist anymore, because they do. Nikola Vucevic, right, those guys. But I look for slower tempo games to pick my centers, because they tend to be a lot more involved in the slower paced games, in the half court, essentially. Now you have a game that's up, run and gun, up and down, passing, 10 seconds or less, like the Phoenix Suns used to be, or the Houston Rockets are today, or at least last year. Well, yeah, you don't want a center, because most centers can't keep up with that kind of pace. That's a guard's game. But a slower game where you can block shots, where you can get rebounds, where you can post up, where you can focus on the perimeter, that's where I look at the opposite of tempo, of up-tempo. I look at slow tempo for those players. Make sense?
Yep, totally makes sense. So, I think we did a pretty good job covering some of the differences in late season and playoff NBA for DFS. Before we get out of here, any other tips or thoughts you want to give out?
Yeah. Only one thought I'll give is playoffs is a lot more defense than regular season. As an example, right, when this year started, the scores were so crazy on these games, it took Vegas well over a month to catch up and realize, okay, we're putting these over-unders too low. Like, we got to increase these, because these games are crazy scoring. And eventually they caught up. You got your 230s, 235, 240 games now. Season started, it was 205, 210, and they were all crushing the over. Well, that's somewhat leveled out, but now that they're going to get into the playoffs is where teams start to play defense. So if you don't get, your 310 fantasy lineup scores, it's not going to be as big of an issue, because there's more defense to be playing. So just take note of that.
Awesome, man. Sounds good. Thanks for stopping by. Anybody who wants to follow Mr. Bear on Twitter, it is at Mr. Bear here. He's a coach with myself at DFS Army. He covers NBA, other sports as well. Are you on the baseball staff, or what's your schedule like after NBA?
No, I'm not really on the baseball staff. I'm not really on the football staff. Primarily a basketball guy. I dabbled in WNBA a little bit. Once NBA season's over, I watched some of those games and kind of follow some of the stats there. But really, I would say 95% of what I do is NBA. At the DFS Army, like you said, if you want to use code BEAR for 10% off,
20 now.
We've even got 20 off. Thank you. We've got some really solid PGA coaching. We've got some really solid, soccer EPL coaching. And
that's right.
Listen,
damn right we do.
Yeah, you sure do. And I follow a lot of your notes and a lot of Josh over on golf. And
Josh doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to be hitting him up when the majors roll around. He hopefully is listening to this is the first time he's hearing about it. But when majors come, I gotta give Josh a shout.
I tell you, man, he's awesome. Really, to have the understanding of not only the players, which always is important, but with golf, then you talk about the actual golf courses themselves being a huge factor, and catering to the strengths of a specific player compared to that course is stuff you can't find very often. So So I do some PGA, not coaching-wise, but actually playing-wise. And those are the sports that I play. But in terms of coaching, it's 95% NBA.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. I'll wrap it up one more time. It's at Mr. Bear here. I am at the DF Sniper. Make sure you leave a 5-star review to the podcast on iTunes. Get yourself in that contest to win a free T-shirt. If you're on YouTube, like, comment, subscribe. Love to hear from you guys. Ideas for episodes. Hit me on Twitter, YouTube. Let me know what you want to hear next. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Good luck in your contest. Bear, thanks for the NBA info. See you next time.